And we need to understand insulin resistance and why it can make you fat, but also at the same time, why it's not the proprietary reason that you're gaining body fat. Because I think people hear a buzzword, much like when people talk about keto diets, carnivore diets, low-carb diets, and immediately they think, that's going to save me. I'm going to lose so much body fat.
I mean, like, every gram of carb has 3 to 4 grams of water. It depends on what study you look at. So if you drop, say, a kilo of carbs from the body, you're going to lose 4 kilos of water with that as well, meaning 5 kilos of weight. Now you're going to see a huge weight drop. Doesn't mean it's a fat drop. Most people tend to see the skin get leaner as well, like around their muscles as well. So it actually looks like you're getting leaner.
Welcome back to the PerformWell podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're looking for performance and wellness optimization, so that you can not only smash your career but also have a better life, better relationships, and better health. We believe that performance and wellness are yin and yang and work together. So listen in as we dive into topics that are going to help you optimize your life for the better.
Welcome back to another episode of PerformWell podcast. Another episode, Dan. I think we're like 39 or 40 now.
We're nearly on 40 episodes, mate. This is just stellar. Like, it's just incredible. The journey has been incredible. But today we are going to be talking about insulin resistance, and it's making you fat. But why? Because insulin resistance is a very hot topic nowadays. Lots of different professionals, coaches, ball bags are talking about insulin. Ball bags. Yeah, ball bags. Talking about not like me. I have one, but not like me. These are people are basically skull fucking the industry, and we need to understand insulin resistance and why it can make you fat, but also at the same time why it's not the proprietary reason that you're gaining body fat. Because I think people hear a buzzword, much like when people talk about keto diets, carnivore diets, low-carb diets, and immediately they think, that's going to save me. I'm going to lose so much body fat. That's not necessarily true. So we talk on the topic of insulin resistance here. We're going to talk about low carb. We're going to talk about what strategies you can implement to actually help your insulin resistance if you do have it. Which everyone seems to think they have insulin resistance these days.
And obviously we've got to talk about what it is, so you guys understand. Do you even have insulin resistance? Do you feel like you have something like that?
Yeah. Well, insulin resistance, from a scientific point and perspective, to keep it nice and simple, imagine you're walking up to a house and you're about to knock on the door to walk into that house. The door is that kind of cell wall, okay? It's the cytoplasm in which the cell holds itself. So that part of the cell, you open the door, we're going into the cell, okay? Walking through the door is going into the cell. A lot of places, a lot of people get confused when they talk about insulin resistance. They just think because your insulin's high, that's bad. That's not a good thing. That's not what insulin resistance is. It basically means that when you're walking up and we have this little bit of glucose that wants to go into the cell, insulin resistance is basically saying that the lock on that door, the insulin, doesn't open. So you walk up to the door, it just doesn't let the glucose in. So you have a lot of excess glucose flowing around the body, which means you produce a lot of insulin, and the insulin then doesn't cause the uptake of the glucose into the cell. That's what insulin resistance is. It's your body not allowing glucose to enter into the cells. That's simply what it is. Okay? So just remember that when we're talking about insulin resistance, it's not a complicated system. It's just literally a lock and key method where the insulin works as the key to get in through the door.
Yeah, and your body's doing it to save you. It's not like your body's against you. It's just the conditions that the body's met with, and it's just doing it to protect you from certain conditions and certain problems. So,
like, every human being will be capped at the amount of insulin that they can produce, and it's different from person to person. So, for example, I will produce a certain amount of insulin. Nick will produce a certain amount of insulin. Now, if you have an excess amount of glucose that comes into the body, and this is where carbohydrates come in because they are a proprietary and primary source of glucose, you're going to find that we're going to have little spikes in glucose. Now, these spikes in glucose are not things to become scared of. And I want to make that very clear. Glucose spikes are very, very normal. And we always naturally have higher glucose spikes in the morning. Because if you think about it, say we're about to do exercise, glucose spikes work similar to heart rate. If I'm sitting here in this position, I start doing loads of jumping jacks, much like if we have loads of carbohydrates in the morning, my heart rate will spike, my glucose will spike. Because my body's not in a position to deal with that yet. It's just woken up. It's just preparing itself. I'm at rest, okay? So glucose spikes are perfectly normal. Insulin resistance, lock and key, okay? So when we're talking about this on a kind of dietary basis, we need to understand if you have it or if you don't. The only way you're going to know if you actually have insulin resistance, you need to go to a doctor and get your hormones checked. That is the way you're going to check it. And there's services out there that will allow it. I know, Nick, you know a bit about Zoe, don't you?
Zoe, yeah. I mean, I don't know much about it. It's supposed to be good, but I don't know.
So Zoe's basically, it's a commercial glucose monitor out there. And it basically
It's more than Zoe's more than just glucose. It's also gut health testing and seeing
Is it?
seeing how your body responds. Yeah, to food.
Oh, I didn't know they
That's it.
expanded. Oh wow.
No, it's
Oh, has it always been that?
It's all combined. Yeah, you do a poo sample and a blood sample.
Oh, okay.
From what I understand, I don't know much about it because I haven't used it, but that's from what I've been told.
Because I know that Stephen Bartlett was advertising it for quite a
Yeah.
long period of time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
About Zoe and Zoe becoming a very
Mate,
popular
I've
thing.
I've had clients where I've told them they're insulin resistant based on what I've seen. I've helped them lower their carb intake. They've seen results, and then they say, "I'm not getting results." They'll go to Zoe and it'll tell them the same thing I told them, and they'll suddenly be like, "Oh yeah, I finally know."
Because Zoe told me that.
It's like, mate, come on, you can tell. We're gonna tell you how we know, but yeah, no,
That's because data doesn't care about feelings.
exactly. And I'll tell you what, some people in this world are just balanced. All right. I'm sorry.
I'm so glad we've come onto a carb-related topic, and we're already feeding the aggression.
Carbs makes people angry, man. I swear to God. I'm sensitive. I'm insulin sensitive. I can eat as many carbs as possible. I'm not saying this to gloat, but I'm part of the hard gainer crowd, so I find it hard to gain muscle, but I find it easy to use carbs and burn fat and move and edit out, mate. And I can't imagine what it's like to be insulin resistant.
Now, on the other side of insulin resistance, a lot of primary, you're going to find a lot of insulin resistance in women more so than men.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just one thing I want to point out. A lot of the conditions that women have, for example, polycystic ovary syndrome, there is a high likelihood that insulin resistance will be coagulated in that as well. Whereas obviously us as blokes won't have that because we don't have ovaries. So there is a higher percentage of insulin resistance in women, which is why there's a lot of ladies who go to Slimming World who immediately turn around and go, carbs are bad, I shouldn't eat carbs, I'm throwing carbs out the window. It's what ends up happening.
And obese people.
Obese people
More likely, I don't know what the percentage is, but more likely have...
It's a higher
resistance.
likelihood. I don't know the percentage exactly, but it's a higher likelihood. Now, you've spoken about obese people. When people are insulin resistant, the likelihood is that if they continue down that path, there's a higher chance they develop diabetes. There's two types of diabetes. We've got type 1, which the pancreas does not produce insulin at all. And these people are normally from a heterogeneous background, a genetic background, where basically they need to inject insulin into the body to then produce, to actually utilize it. So people will have a glucose spike, a glucose monitor, given by the NHS to tell them where their glucose is sitting, and when it hits too high, they'll inject that insulin into them, and it basically lowers that glucose response, so then they don't basically go into shock.
Which is what you guys know as blood sugar.
Yeah. And type 2 diabetes is the one that we normally, not all the time, can come from dietary. It's basically where you don't produce enough insulin, or the insulin you produce is faulty. So imagine you're trying to put a key in the door, but it's the wrong key. Is essentially what that is. And that basically means that we have higher spikes in glucose over time, and you do have symptoms like feeling lightheaded. You end up taking quite a lot of water on as well onto your body. And there's other symptoms along that, but you can have a look. If you go to diabetes.org, and that is a genuine website, and it's a good website, you can have a look at more of that and more of the interesting facts. Just a little statistic here. I love a statistic. So type 1 diabetes affects 8% of diabetics. Type 2 diabetes affects 90%. Now, when I say that, alarm bells go. Where's the 2%? What is that other 2% that's not there? So I said 90% affect type 2 of diabetics. Type 1 affects 8%. There's 2% not accounted for. There's more than type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and I want you to bear that in mind as well, that there are more types out there. So if any statistics are just giving you type 1, type 2, you could even, if you are going down that line, this is more a clinical matter. I'm not a doctor, but this is more a clinical matter from what I know, that there are other types of diabetes out there as well.
But with that being said, how do you know you're insulin resistant if you haven't had your glucose tested? If you're obviously not diabetic, you'll probably know this by now. How do you know if you are insulin resistant versus insulin sensitive? What do you reckon with clients that you have, right, that haven't tested themselves, and they might complain of certain fatigue issues or whatever? What do you think is the highlighting factor?
I think one of the big ones, as you say, is a fatigue issue. It's almost a chronic fatigue issue because you're not uptaking the body's primary form of fuel in glucose. So we're lacking that kind of glycogen storage to then be able to use it throughout the day. So you will be feeling tired, you'll be feeling really lethargic and just not like you want to do things. The other side of the coin there, when we're talking about insulin resistance and when by people, the way we can test it is dietary. If we're talking from our practitioner side of things as personal trainers, what we would do for you is one thing, very important thing, you have to be bang on with your diet. If you are bang on with your diet, I'm talking weighing foods, tracking foods, making sure the data's there, and you're still not losing weight in a deficit, we can then begin to argue that it may be insulin resistance causing you to retain excess weight, because if you are having excess glycogen in the body, it will then be stored in the body and you will retain more water and retain more body weight.
Well, the problem as well is if you're insulin resistant and let's say, for example, you do have something sweet and something sugary, like sugar is already known to cause you to crave more sugary foods. Like it's the higher your blood sugar goes, the more you're going to crave food, like certain bad types of food, etc. Like
that's because of the cakes, dopamine response that comes with it.
Yeah, etc. But that's what happens, right? So if you're eating foods that are slow releasing sugars, you're going to find that you're not going to have cravings for certain types of foods. It's going to be easier to stick to your diet. So we need to obviously take that into account when it comes to your diet as well. So yeah, it's one of those key things. I've trained a few clients in the past where we've kind of debated whether they're insulin resistance or not. I've trained a few ladies with polycystic ovary syndrome too, which we can kind of open up a little bit more about these days, because 1 in 8 women have polycystic ovary syndrome, and thereby 1 in 8 women may also be insulin resistant at that point in time. But it's one thing to also factor into your lifestyle that before you start pointing fingers and blaming things, we speak about this on every single podcast, make sure you have your foundations in place first. Okay, we speak about it so much. If you're sitting there with a very, I don't like to say dodgy diet, but if you're sitting there where you're not on the calories where you should be losing weight, you're not weighing your food, you're not tracking accurately, you're not consuming fiber, you're not sleeping well, and your water and hydration is not on point, please stop immediately pointing fingers to carbohydrates, because we need those in place as a baseline to say, okay, everything's working here. We're in the right thing. All of our data is here. What could it be? And this is where, again, we come in as practitioners, we take away one of the things and see how you respond. Because there are many people out there that don't have those foundations to even start with to then push themselves forward. Yeah.
You know? And now from kind of your perspective of low carb now, low carb diets always sparks a fury in us as practitioners and against us as practitioners and clients. I literally had a client this week turn around and say, I want to try a low carb diet. And I turned around and said, what's the reason you want to try a low carb / keto diet? He was like, I want to lose more weight. What's your experience working with people like this?
Sorry?
So when someone turns around, so I've had someone turn around today, this is a little bit of a case study, turn around this week, and he's basically gone, I want to do a keto diet to lose more weight.
Yeah.
What is it they're actually losing at that point in time? Apologies for interrupting the podcast. We know you're getting fully engrossed into this episode, and we really appreciate you stopping on the video on YouTube or on Spotify if you found us through one of the search pages. Make sure to leave a review and a subscription if you haven't already. But we just wanted to interject a point here that me and Nick have 15 years of coaching experience between us, and it's only getting better as we've got better guests on the podcast. The only way we can do that, though, is with the growth of our program that we've just released. We've got a 12-month PerformWell program, which has just dropped, and we'd love you guys to get involved in it. If you want to learn more details, make sure to head to the description, as we've got our website in there, which can give you a full overlay of the program. We're looking to help career-driven professionals, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and anyone dominate their life by improving their lifestyle. Me and Nick like to claim ourselves as experts in this area, and if you want to check out some of our other transformations, I'm sure you do. We've got some amazing people who have performed so well off the back of this program. Have a cracking day, and we really appreciate your time. Let's get back to the podcast. When they take the carbs away.
Well, they're losing water.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like every gram of carb has 3 to 4 grams of water. It depends on what study you look at. So if you drop, say, a kilo of carbs from the body, you're going to lose 4 kilos of water with that as well, meaning 5 kilos of weight. Now, you're going to see a huge weight drop. Doesn't mean it's a fat drop. Most people tend to see the skin get leaner as well, like around their muscles as well. So it actually looks like you're getting leaner. Now, if you're on the reverse of that and you actually have more carbs in your diet, 400 to 500 grams, for example, then you're looking at another 2.5 to 3 kilos of weight, which on top of that. So now you look at carbs as a bad thing. But yeah, that's my experience. But honestly, keto, low carb has its place. It really can help with insulin control. So for people that are genuinely insulin resistant, low carb has been shown to actually reverse and help people like that.
The thing I say is, we've spoken on diets before. Diets are adherence strategies. Diets aren't what's going to cause you to lose weight. It's going to be a calorie deficit coming from a diet that causes you to lose weight. And that's it. There's no more like specific food you need to eat that's going to make you lose weight. There's no like diet that's going to make you lose weight. I know you're going to have loads of people out there preaching keto, preaching carnivore, preaching low carb, or Eddie Abu turning around and saying every food in every aisle is shit. Even I saw him having a go at Frosted Fancies the other day. Yeah, made me very sad, that one. I mean, I knew that was coming, but it doesn't stop me eating it. But it's understanding the premise of where we are with your diets. And please, as well, from a mindset side of things, please don't get stressed if your weight fluctuates. Your weight is naturally going to fluctuate through water throughout the day. If I go and drink a 1 litre bottle of water now, my weight's going to be up by 1 kilo, most likely.
Well, I mean, if you're insulin resistant, I would say the first thing you need to do is actually have a look at your diet and just see, are you eating a lot of sugar and a lot of shit food? Because I'm not an Eddie Abu fan. I think a lot of the things he says is bullshit. Like you can't have all these foods because it's bad for you. Yes, you can in moderation. But if your diet 80% of the time, 60% of the time is shit food with lots of sugar, I'm not surprised you're insulin resistant. All right. Now I can get away with it because I'm luckily genetically in a better place. All right. And that has nothing to do with, unfortunately I can't, get a magic wand and make your situation any different than mine in terms of genetics. But you've got to deal with what you've got. If your food is full of shit and you're full of a lot of sugary food, you're more likely to have insulin resistance issues if you're overweight. So, I would look at that and I would actually reduce the sugar intake. I'll reduce all the processed crap you're eating most of the time and then have it at least 20% of the time. Increase your fiber intake as well. Anything that slows down the rate of sugar in the bloodstream will help insulin resistance and make you more insulin sensitive. It's been proven, especially with low carb diets, keto diets. They are the foundation diets that show it works. However, you don't have to go that far to actually achieve it. You just need slower releasing sugars. That's it.
If you are thinking about doing a low carb diet, from us as practitioners, you're looking at about 100 grams of carbs or less. And I think it also correlates to body weight depending on what your body weight is. Low carb. It's 100.
Low carb's 50.
Is it 50 grams for that?
Depending on the person. Like obviously for me, it might be like 75, but a smaller person, maybe 50.
But you'd be looking at that and make sure you're tracking that kind of number, because there's a reason our body uses carbohydrates as its primary fuel source. It's because they're abundant, they're easy to break down, and we can utilize them without too many byproducts being produced. And even then, every mechanism has another mechanism that helps like balance it out. So if you're finding insulin resistance is a thing, there's probably going to be a mechanism in your system which also helps that insulin resistance by uptaking glucose in another way.
I've actually got a ladder system with carbs, and like, so the first step is like, let's say we're up here and you look at your diet and you in your head you think, oh, I'm eating a little bit here and there, but I'm actually eating pretty good. And you track it and you realize that actually lots of your food is shit. All right. First thing you do is, how can I replace most of the sugary foods with lower sugar foods? Or how can I slow down the rate of sugar? So if you have, for example, a potato in your diet, it's relatively high in sugar, but it's also relatively high in fiber. So it slows the rate of sugar down in the bloodstream.
Can I interject a point? When Nick says sugar, it's not all glucose. There's loads of different types of sugar. There'd probably maltose in that one, wouldn't it? They're just different types of sugar. Sugar's not caster sugar, so don't worry about that.
When I say potatoes high in sugar, I'm not saying you're going to be eating fucking spoonfuls of sugar. But every carb gets broken down into a basic molecule of sugar. Some kind of sucrose, glucose, fructose,
maltose, dextrose.
Fructose. That's the reason why people are saying fruit, like Eddie Abu saying fruit is bad, because it's got too much fructose. And if you look at high fructose corn syrup, for example, in America, it's the leading cause of like a lot of issues that people are experiencing with diabetes, etc. But that's not the case. So if you have food with your sugar, okay, so for example, we have potato, it's high in sugar, but it's also high in fiber. It can slow the sugar, the rate of sugar digestion in your bloodstream, meaning that you don't have a huge spike. You actually have a very nice controlled spike. Now you get less cravings for shit food. You have better control of your blood sugar, and you can improve insulin resistance while still having carbs in your diet. So the first step is having carbs, but trying to find sources that are more slower digestion. So for example, complex carbohydrates. Is it low GI?
No, low GI. It's low GI foods. It is low. Yeah, low GI.
Low GI and low GI. I can't remember what the fuck it is. Never mind.
Low GI, glycemic index food. High GI foods are going to be stuff like crisps, sugar.
Slow releasing carbs is what you're looking at first. That's the first step to reverse and actually just reduce insulin resistance.
You want something that basically sustains over time. Now, your point about fiber, I just want to add a little analogy in. When you think of fiber, think about a football stadium. Think about the turnstiles in a football stadium. The turnstiles are your fiber. They're slowing down the rate of glucose going through the bloodstream, and they're just allowing it just to be very well fed into the cells, and then it can go. This is all happening at a cellular level, by the way. Okay, so when you're worried about it impacting your body on a huge scale, okay, it's a very small scale that obviously balances out throughout the body. But just when you think about fiber, think of it like a turnstile system, and just think about it slowing the rate down. And that's why it's really important for us, because it gives our body time to think. It gives the sympathetic nervous system time to think about what it's doing, to try and uptake enough of the product that is being produced.
This is why fruit juices are deemed bad for you. Okay, and having fruit on its own is not bad for you. And the reason obviously is because when you have fruit juice, you take away the fiber, you have a massive hit of sugar into the bloodstream, and you get a huge insulin spike and then a crash. And then that crash is where you get that feeling of like, ugh, and you want to eat stuff and eat as much as you can, and that's why your calories go up. So if you're going to have fruit, best of all is to have fruit with the fiber still intact. That is the whole version of fruit. The next best step is to have fruit with the fiber still in the smoothie. So having a smoothie where you grind it all up together rather than take off the skin and whatever. And then obviously the last option is a fruit juice. You can still have a fruit juice. You can be on a holiday having an orange juice, it's fine. It's just if you're getting insulin resistance and you're feeling the crash every time, that could be right. And if you are going to have the fruit juice, having it with food can also help to slow the related sugar as well. So actually, it's not even a bad thing if you have it with food itself.
A strategy that I'd use for you to check if you're insulin resistant just at home rather than going to the doctors and hormone testing is I do like what we call an insulin crash log. And I've done this with clients before where basically you get a little notes page up, you can go on your phones, get a little notes page up and basically write down like day 1, meal 1. Insulin crash, and then just rate it on 1 to 5 and say how heavy the crash was. So as soon as you start to feel very slow and sluggish, write down what level of crash you're feeling and try and quantify it. 5 being you're feeling awful, you're really drained, you're really tired, you just want to go to sleep. 1 being you feel absolutely fine, you can get on with your day, and just log that. And if you're noticing you're getting a lot of 4 and 5s, the likelihood is you are a little bit insulin resistant, so you want to try and find a process like Nick's spoken about there to try and bring it back in again.
Yeah.
And trying to taper in the ways that you're doing your diet as well. So use something like an insulin log. I like to do, I say an insulin log, it's not an actual log for insulin, but it's a good way to think about it, to understand what your body's doing.
There is another thing as well. Now, this has been a little while since I've learned this, right? But another thing that can cause insulin resistance is not just the carbs as well. It's also fat intake. And it's not all fats. Certain types of fats are inherently worse when it comes to like preventing your cells from uptaking in sugars correctly, such as trans fatty acids, for example. There's a reason why trans fatty acids are deemed really bad in your diet, and the reason why it's used as a shelf life enhancer. It's like coagulated fat that you get, like you see, for example, like a baked product. Not every baked product has it, but like especially in the older days, they would use it in a lot of pork pies and a lot of things to preserve shelf life. And that has been shown to also prevent your cells from uptaking sugars, which can also cause insulin resistance and eventually diabetes too. So it's not just all sugars. It's quite a complex topic, but 9 times out of 10, if you're watching this and you haven't gone to a doctor with the issues you're facing, you might not have anything severe yet. So it might just be a case of you can fix it with a few simple changes.
100%. And I think that's been a superb podcast. I think we've spoken very well on the topic there. And if you've got any questions about insulin resistance or anything regarding diet, please drop it in the comments below. Make sure to like, follow and subscribe, and make sure to drop us 5 stars on Spotify. We really appreciate you. This podcast is going so well this year, and we hope you're enjoying the new kind of dynamic that we're adding in, which is the PerformWell. We've got some huge guests coming on, and we will catch you guys later.
Ciao.